So it's important in youth ministry to engage in youth culture. And what I mean by youth culture is primarily books, music videos, television shows, and movies that young people are watching, that young people are engaged in. And this is important for two primary reasons. First, to develop the tools of faith in order to critique that which is in youth culture, but also to value, to affirm that which is valuable in culture. This is important. And second, it's important because it provides an avenue through which to talk with young people about important topics. And what we did last night was watch the first 20 minutes of a show on MTV called If You Really Knew Me. And what If You Really Knew Me does is goes around to high schools in the United States and tries to break down the barriers that exist within certain groups. So you've got these groups, these cliques, like the popular kids, the preps, the emos, the jocks, the hicks, the goths, the theater kids, the music kids. You've got these different groups. And oftentimes what happens is they don't associate with one another. They form certain judgments about one another, and there's very little interaction between them. Oftentimes what happens, not just with young people, but with adults too, is that we form these conclusions about one another and our identities are formed over and against the other. So you don't want to associate with other groups because that would make you vulnerable, your identity vulnerable. So there's a lot of pressure from within these groups to behave a certain way, to behave in the way that a popular person should act, to behave in the way that a theater kid should act. There's these pressures within the groups, but there's also, you get to see pressure outside, pressure from teachers, pressure from parents to act a certain way, to succeed in the way that parents and teachers think that you should succeed. And it's hard to live up to a lot of this pressure. And you really get to see this in all of their lives, but also in the stoner's life. So this provided an important avenue through which to talk about drugs. And my 4 years of youth ministry, I've struggled with how to have a decent conversation without pointing the finger at someone, to have this conversation about drugs. And If You Really Knew Me provided that opportunity. You get to see this, that this guy has turned to drugs primarily because he wants to escape. He wants to escape the tragedy of his young life. His parents are providing a destructive environment at home for him, and he wants to escape. He doesn't want to go home, and he needs an escape, and so he's turned to drugs to do this. And you see how he wants something more out of his life. He sees how this is leading him to a destructive path. And he gets the support from some of his fellow classmates who have gone down this road and have changed by going to after-school activities and these other different outlets for finding an escape. And this is important for young people to see. It's also important to talk about personal experiences, I think. So after the show was over, we discussed what they thought about the show and if it had anything to do with their school, and it did. These are universal issues that young people are going through. But I also wanted to talk about drugs because at the school that our youth group goes to, it's very easy to find drugs. And it was similar at my school when I was in high school. I had a very good friend up until my freshman year. He started getting into pot, and I didn't want to do it, so we kind of grew apart. And by the time the summer between sophomore and junior year, he had gotten more into harder drugs. And he was at a party, and 3 of his friends and him decided to go get some munchies at Taco Bell. Well, they took the back roads, and they were speeding, and they lost control, and they ended up hitting a telephone pole. And 3 of them flew out of the car through the sunroof and died instantly out in the field. And Another one was strapped in. She was unconscious for 2 weeks and then died. This was a tragedy at our school. And I remember two images have been burned into my mind. First was visiting my friend's mom after this happened, and she was just crying. And we hugged each other and we cried with each other, and it was a very painful experience. The second experience was first day of school. I had social studies, was the first class, and my friend's girlfriend was sitting in the desk right next to me, and she was just crying uncontrollably. And she just couldn't help it. And we were all in a lot of pain through it. But she was crying for like the first 2 weeks of class, and the whole year she was just devastated by this. And this is what drugs can do. I mean, I don't want to give the message that you take one drag, your life is going to be horrible, but it can lead to more and more dangerous and destructive activities. And I don't want to see what happened to my friend happen to kids in my youth group. So this is, I think, important to share. It provided a great avenue to share. And I wanted to ground it in the Bible. And in the first chapter of Genesis, Genesis 1, chapter 27, you have this beautiful image where humans are created in the image of God. And in surrounding cultures, Babylon, Egypt, it was often thought that only the rulers, the powerful people, were created in the image of God. Well, here you have an image where it's universal. You can't take it away. Everybody has this. It's not just the popular kids who have this. It's not just the preps who have this. It's not just the stoners or the emos who have this. Everybody has this. And what Genesis is trying to do here is break down the barriers that exist between us, because at the fundamental level, we are all created in this image of God. And what would the world look like if we actually lived this out? How would the world look differently? How would we treat one another differently if we actually believe that all humans are created with this profound sacredness in the image of God? That's the question that we discussed, and that's the question that I leave with you. I'd like to know your thoughts. Thanks.